G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan that hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, the Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting.
Good evening, gents.
G'day, how are you going?
G'day.
Oh, yeah.
And special hello to Byron. How are you?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very well, thanks. So for those who don't know Byron, and it's Byron Young, he's the Gunsmith and Workshop Supervisor for Beretta Australia. And the reason I know that is that's what it says on your email.
It does say that on my email.
Signature
That's right.
block. So if I've got it wrong, change your signature block.
No, that is what it says.
And I believe you're in Victoria. I hope so, because I actually recommended someone to speak to you on Facebook. Someone was looking for a Victorian gunsmith, and I said, I know one.
Yep. No, we're in Melbourne. Yep.
Byron and I have worked together on a couple of projects, most notably the what we call Indie, which was the CDR platform that we built for Beretta Australia and SSAA, which I've hunted with for about 18 months now, and most recently the Minecraft BRX, which I'm very happy. I took it to range.
That is what it kept getting called in the workshop
That's
when
it.
it was getting done. Everybody was like, it's a Minecraft gun.
That's it. It's the Minecraft gun. And
Yeah.
I showed it to my 10-year-old son. He said, that's a Minecraft rifle. And
Yeah.
then he said, can I have it? So, but before we jump into that conversation about customizing rifles, which is a bit of a thing of mine, how about we do our usual around the traps? And I suppose, for those who don't know, I've been single dadding for 5 weeks with my wife overseas, so nothing's happened much this week for me. But for Ian and Jono, there's probably let's talk about the local slam.
Well, where do we start?
Where do we
It
start?
was a hell of a weekend.
It was an
Wasn't
awesome
it?
weekend.
Slam aside, so Byron, we buddied up with a couple of newer hunters, that listeners to the podcast, and invited them out to a private block that we were lucky enough to get access to. And so Jono took one of them and I took the other. And because there were two pairs, we had to up the stakes a little bit. So knowing what sort of game was on the block, there was pigs, goats and deer.
Nice.
We dreamed up this local slam competition for the weekend that meant that we had to take a pig, a goat and a deer for the weekend, and the first team to do so would win. Now, that changed the dynamics of the
Oh,
weekend
absolutely.
like you would not believe. The competitiveness that came out of everybody. But more than that, normally when you go away on maybe a hunting weekend, some of these private land ones, I loathe to use the words boys trip, but it's a weekend away, often with the fellas, and you'd head out and you'd go hunting and you'd hunt your choice of game. But because we'd put the slam on the line, once you'd shot your first pig, no matter how big it was, they were off the menu.
Mm.
And we're bumping into them everywhere. And normally you'd just carve them up. You'd be getting them out of the way and laying into them. you really wouldn't hold back on them, especially some of the big ones we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for my team, I'm pretty sure the first pig we shot was about this big. Right? It was a little bit bigger than that. It was, but it was a young pig, which meant that we weren't shooting pigs for the rest of the weekend.
Man.
And the same happened to goats. I think John had gone to goats early, which meant all of the rest of the mobs of goats that you saw, and you saw probably in the hundreds all tallied up, they were off, right? He was chasing deer because he had the first two. So it was a really fun weekend. Lots of bullshit, I guess, spoken and sledged at each other, but had a hell of a time. Good. Jono?
Oh, it was a brilliant weekend. Yeah, it was fantastic. And as Ian said, the competition really added a different dynamic, a different spin to the whole weekend. We were out. We went out together. We parked in the same spot. Ian and John went one way, Rowan and I went the other, and we were hunting whatever we could find come up first. Excuse me. And we were sitting there, and Rowan said to me, he said, "Oh, at least they haven't shot anything." And then about 2 minutes later, we just heard boom. And at the time, we happened to be putting a stalking on some goats. That was the first game that we had seen. We had seen plenty sign, but the goats stuck their head up. And then about a minute later, we heard boom, another shot, and the goats just dispersed. And we're like, right, well, that's them on the board. The message came through on the Zolio that, goats down, we're on the board.
Brag messages.
And we had nothing at that point.
It was funny. It was funnier than just a brag message.
Yeah.
Because then we were climbing hills to get Facebook messages out to tell the punters what we were doing.
Yeah.
So you're burning time. There was a point in time where you were literally just climbing up out of the gully.
That was it. So within about probably 15, 20 minutes of them getting their pig, we actually got a pig. We were stalking goats, and we came across a mob of pigs, and Rowan put a great shot in on quite a nice little ball. And then we shot a couple more out of that mob. And then we kept going, and we saw some goats, and we put a stalk in on the goats, and we shot the goats. And literally, Rowan shot the goats, and I had this idea to get to the top of the hill so I could put up a brag post and show off. I was 3/4 of the way up the hill, and suddenly I see Hurls and John up on the side of the hill. They had seen a mob of goats and were coming in to have a stalk on them, heard the shot, and then saw me up on the hill. So we had a bit of a banter on that, but that kept I think the banter continued the whole weekend. It really was. It was great.
It still is. Even on the messenger group tonight, it's still going, which is pretty funny.
It was
got to get rid of that photo, by the way, off our page. But anyway, it was a hell of a lot of fun in the country. We were in a couple of thousand acres, incredibly steep gorge country, so perfect goat stuff. At places, that gorge was sheer drop down 150 meters or so to the valley floor. It was nuts. It was great. It was such great terrain. It made everything challenging. It gave our rifles the opportunity to do some cool stuff. I was running the Benelli Lupo that I called you the day before we left to talk about getting that Spartan thing on.
Yep.
And I had the Eliminator 5 on. And at one point during the weekend, we had we had pigs at 560 meters, wasn't it?
That was it. Yeah.
530, 560, something like that. And I thought, stuff it. We've got the tool. Let's have a go. And I lined up with it was 3006 at 560 meters. But the Eliminator said it gave me all of the holdovers and everything that I needed, the elevation points. And we let it go. And I missed. Now, we had it all on camera. And it was only when I got it back home and looked at it on a big screen in slow-mo, man, that was on for all money. It was a bloody good shot. Unfortunately, the pig's head was down behind a rock, and I hit the rock. And that's why we missed the shot in hindsight. So, man, what a cool experience.
That was a great experience.
And a lot of people do long-range shooting, but it's good to be able to use the tools for what they're designed for and have that confidence in them. So be keen to have another go at something at that distance, even when I get back out to the range and try it out, because I was pretty impressed with that.
And we're glad, Mark, you went there, because with the number of pigs, you would have been you would have run out of ammo, put it that way.
Yes. Leave that there where it is. Leave that where it lies.
Well, whoever his buddy would have been sorely disappointed that they got stuck on one species for the whole weekend.
Yeah, there would be no deer or no goats, that's for sure.
No goats, no deer.
But yeah, we saw hundreds of pigs and goats. Good deer numbers as well. It was a fantastic block. There was so much game on that block. It's crazy.
You had a wholly different experience though. You and Rowan saw heaps of animals. It was Hendo and I. I mean, yes, we saw heaps of pigs, but we shot goats in pretty much the only mob of goats we saw, and we shot deer in pretty much the only deer that showed up. Whereas you're seeing them in mobs of 15 and 20.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in the one day.
I saw two, and then I saw one. That was it.
Yeah, and that one day we saw at least 25 deer, and didn't get one, unfortunately. But yeah, we must have seen 25 deer. We saw mobs of 20, 25 goats at a time, and we saw multiple mobs. So yeah, very different experience. Obviously, you guys got lucky and won.
Skill. We shot what we saw. We didn't let him walk. Anyway, we'll leave the banter alone. Poor old. Both of our teams could have closed the slam out on the first day.
Yeah, absolutely.
We both ran into a bit of trouble with certain things. Poor old Rowan is still a bit raw about good sized bucks standing in front of him and having feeding problems with his ammo.
Yeah, correct. He was just really struggling to feed that rifle. Yeah.
That rifle, how much do you reckon it weighed?
Oh, well,
it's like made out of solid steel.
Yeah, Byron, you'd appreciate this, mate. It was a Parker Hale 270 with a heavy target barrel on it, and he was lugging this thing up and down the hills and trying to shoot offhand with this thing.
I work with someone who highly reveres Parker Hale target rifles and would probably try and do the same thing. So that gives me a
one
chuckle
might be up for sale. He's so frustrated with it.
Yeah, I reckon this one's up for sale. I reckon.
Yeah, okay. Right tool for the job, perhaps not so much.
Not so much. No, that's all right. But great weekend all up, Mark, and looking forward to putting that one on again and picking a couple of new fellas to come with us next time and see what happens.
I'm certainly going to try and make myself available for that time. And I might just shoot pigs.
In the spirit of it, sure.
Yeah, well, I'll take the what's name. I'll take the BRX, and if it's in with 100 meters, I'll take it. With the
they're all within 100 meters.
With the aim point, I'll take it. So
at one point, we were within 2 or 3 meters of the pigs. We were trying to catch them by hand at one point. So
breaking from cover at 2 to 5 meters everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay. So as we said, Byron and I have worked together on a couple of projects, and really wanting to get him on one because technically Byron, I don't know how you would describe it, but Byron is part of us, part of our getting that gear to us. Both of you were using rifles that went through his hand on the weekend, both those Benellis, and I've certainly had a lot to do with Byron in terms of rifle builds. So I suppose before we jump into the technical side of things, Byron, why don't you give us a bit of a background how you came to be out there at Beretta in the gunsmithing space?
Okay, well, yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, look, I suppose as most people that sort of get involved in guns as growing up, watching movies and all that sort of stuff, you always get a bit of a fascination for, guns and cars and all the toys that everybody ends up having. But look, out of school, I did an apprenticeship as a fitter and turner in the automotive industry as an engine reconditioner. So, I mean, we were working on anything from mainly, drag cars and historical restoration stuff through to a bit of aeronautical, bit of maritime stuff. I was there for, I think it was around about 8 years or so. And I think I just wanted a bit of a change of pace. And by that point, I'd already had my firearms license and was, straight into doing a lot of target shooting and just having fun and having a play. So I still started looking for a job and happened to see the advertised Beretta Australia job and went, oh, perfect, I'll put in for that. That guns have always interested me. And I haven't looked back since. I mean, I suppose you could say I kind of fell into it in that regard, that it just happened to be the right time. The machining side of things is not, I wouldn't say similar in terms of what you're doing, but the way you do it is very much the same. And working on engines, I mean, some of the tolerances are 10 times finer than, say, chambering a rifle, for example, in terms of minimum, maximum, stuff like that. So, I mean, it goes well with one of my biggest passions is machining in itself. Doesn't really matter what sort of machining it is. I like making swarf, I like making chips, I like creating things and fixing them as well, so long as it's not a complete nightmare to fix. So look, I've been at Beretta now, trying to think how long it's been. I think it'd be about 4 years now I've been there. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, we obviously opened up the doors of Beretta Australia to all makes and models of guns, not just our own, for customization, repair, and stuff like that. Every day going to work, there's more work sitting there.
So you didn't actually come. Oh, that's interesting. You didn't actually come from a trade background with firearms. It's just something you moved into.
So I mean, that's the biggest problem in Australia now, is that there's no I suppose there's no recognised qualification anymore as gunsmithing, or not something you can go to a trade school or a tech school to learn. Most of the time,
okay.
I mean, it depends. All states have their different legislation, but for Victoria, for example, it's to become a gunsmith. Generally speaking, obviously, need a dealer's license to obviously take books and repair and modify firearms. But the only qualification that they really want is generally any metalworking trade, so fitter and turner. I mean, they accept locksmiths and sheet metal workers, all that sort of thing. I'm not sure about the other states of Australia, but I'm fairly certain they're pretty similar. And no one really offers, training per se in Australia. Obviously, around the world, there's different avenues for that. But here it's sort of most of the guys that are doing gunsmithing are, either some sort of metalworking trade background, and they might have been gunsmithing for 30, 40 years, but they might not have gotten started in it straight away. Some might have just come from general fabrication. It sort of varies. Everyone's different. I mean, I've met gunsmiths that have been doing it for 30 years and they have no technical trade background. They've just been sort of doing it for that long before it was needed to have a trade to do it and have the dealer's license, and most importantly, the experience and the skills to do it.
Now that explains why Pine Rivers is a locksmith.
Correct. Yeah. So
I
locksmiths.
could never figure that out. Here's a robbery part, and here's the fixing.
They've shut down now.
It's kind of like they were playing on both sides of the fence there.
They've shut down, Mark, unfortunately.
I was going to say, I can't speak for them specifically, but locksmith is one of the trades that is recognised as a stepping stone for gunsmithing in Australia.
Yeah, because they were. John has told me they've closed down. I didn't know that, but then again, I haven't been there for years. But yeah, I got some stuff done by them some years ago, and they were a locksmith.
Yep.
And it was like kind of you went in there and it was like
the locksmith
kind
office
of two
first.
shops.
Yep.
It was like there was a long counter, and if you to the left is the locksmithing side, and to the right was the gunsmithing side.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
I mean,
and they didn't do just. They did all sorts of gunsmithing work there.
Yeah.
But I didn't never realised that. That's very interesting.
I mean, the other option that there's probably quite a few of would be some sort of defence force training, like as an armour or something like that. Obviously, natural
an
career,
armoury type thing.
Yeah, natural career progression into doing something external in the same field, obviously. But many people that were trained by their father or their family who done it 20 years ago, and obviously they just followed straight in the footsteps. Unlike the rest of like America and stuff, obviously, where there's formal courses and education for it, not something that's really offered here in Australia, at least not that I know of.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've been involved in vet education for a number of years, on and off, through different roles, and that was one I never thought that. There's basically a vet course for just about everything, so it's quite enlightening that they actually haven't got a gunsmithing one. Because most people you talk to who are involved in gunsmithing have a fitter and turner style, type of background, one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, in most of the work,
you often hear people saying, "Sorry, Byron." You often hear people saying, "Take that to a qualified gunsmith."
Yeah, it's a bit. It's an interesting one because qualified, I suppose, it would be recognised as that's what they do for a living. I guess is what it boils down to, at least sort of nowadays anyway. But looking at sort of what you learn as a fitter and turner, or some sort of machining background, most of the time you think of gunsmithing as obviously rebarreling, repairing firearms, making components and stuff. Generally speaking, all those skills are usually taught as a fitter and turner. You learn how to cut threads, machine bores, ream holes, all sorts of stuff, drill and tap sight holes. But you're just thinking of it of a different perspective. Instead of mounting an iron sight, you're mounting a flange to something. The process is the same. It's just not a different item.
I suppose so. Yeah. Because certainly throughout times of war, they simply just turn one type of machining manufacturing into an armaments.
Absolutely.
Many years ago, when you were allowed to have semi-autos, I had a little M1 carbine. It was a little 30 cal, basically threw rocks to about 100 meters when they fell out of the sky. But it was made by Ford.
Yep, it's interesting.
The Ford stamp on it. There was a Ford.
there's a lot of those sort of types of firearms from those periods that were made by some very unconventional manufacturers that you would never have guessed, especially stuff like that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, this was made by Ford. I know GM did, in the States, GM did the same thing, and they basically, carved off parts of their factories and established them for that kind of purpose, or not established, but turned them over for that purpose especially. But yeah, they were, and I mean, in Australia, Schlesinger was made guns.
Yep.
I'm assuming they made guns, or maybe they were made at Lithgow. But
yeah, Schlesinger made a lot of
they were
components.
Schlesinger. So, you go to a sports store, there's a tennis racket, and then there's a rifle type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting history in Australia of gunsmithing, and the differences, and like I said, everyone, the guys that you sort of talk to in the circle, there's guys that are, obviously more, or what I say, not more experienced, but more prevalent in doing certain things, obviously like stock making. There's guys that might only do stock making and maybe only a little bit of other stuff, and then guys that might only do barrel fitting and machining. There's a very mixed bag, and then there's guys that just do cerakoting and things like that, and then obviously there's the ones that sort of try and do everything. So I mean, some people sort of go, no, that's what I'm good at, that's what I like doing, that's what I'll stick to. It can vary quite a lot. And the thing is, there's a lot of guys around doing it.
Yeah, that's what I found. You tend to get, they're either metal specialists or timber specialists, generally.
Yeah,
right?
there's always those two categories, and there's a few guys in between, but yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, this has been my Tikka before, a T3, but not a T3X. So the first one, I got a stock built for that. And that guy, he also did metal fabrication, but his real specialty was stock. He was a stock cutter and shaper. And that was really his specialty. So, whereas other people, I've met, I think, is it Swan Barrels here in Queensland? Is that... Mm-hmm. There's a couple of, there was a prevalent barrel maker just over at Everett Park here, and very close to the city.
Engineering.
Total Solutions, yeah. They made a lot of, so when I used to shoot competition, you'd come across a lot of their stuff as well.
So Byron, do you travel to some of these shotgun shoots? Are you one of the guys that does the the servicing for shotguns at
Yep.
Is it called Forever Servicing?
Yeah,
like that. I remember when I was on the shotgun circuit. Yeah, it was always good to show up and see you guys there to take the shotgun back and give it a good servicing and going over. It was it's a great service Beretta offers.
Yeah, look, I've done quite a few of them. I mean, we try and share it around a little bit. One of the other gunsmiths, Sergey, who's been a Beretta for 25, 27 years, something like that. He's mainly the one that does most of that stuff, but yeah, I've been to quite a few. We're always trying to fit as many of them as we can, but obviously there's a big logistical side of it for the travel and all the parts that we have to bring and stuff like that. But yeah, look, I think we do, I mean, on average we do sort of one a month, sometimes more, depends each different part of the year. Sometimes there's 4 or 5 in a month. I mean, COVID has obviously changed that recently, and we're sort of bringing it back up now. But we usually attend the larger sort of state carnival events, nationals and things like that. Usually the ones we go to. I think earlier on the year I was on Flinders Island. That had a sporting event there, which I'd never been to Flinders Island before. It was good fun. Sort of went, well, we haven't ever been here before, let's go there. But we usually obviously attend sort of the big ones like Roma in Queensland, Wagga Wagga, WA ones, all that sort of stuff.
So do you do, I know with Beretta, I remember the first time I ever saw a Beretta shotgun that had just like the slab of timber on the end of it,
I don't do it, but Sergey is the master woodsman at Beretta.
He does the shaping on that, the fitting and shaping?
All by hand, checkers them, the whole 9 yards, all by hand. He is a true wizard.
Wow.
He is a true wizard of stock making. Absolute beautiful work. But yeah, he's been doing that for a very, very long time. Yeah. So generally speaking, we do that. I mean, we can do that on any model Beretta. Obviously, it's probably the most popular on, say, a DT11 and the higher grade guns. So generally speaking, person purchases that with the stock, or you can add it later, but generally they buy it as an inletted blank, which we import from Beretta, Italy, make an appointment, and they're there at our head office in Melbourne for a couple of days, changing it, testing it, at our range at work. It's a very long process. I mean, an enjoyable one, obviously, but to get it exactly how they want it, and how it fits them and all that sort of thing. And then they might take it for a bit. I mean, we usually try to get them to take it in sort of its not rough form, but obviously it's shaped and it has a rough sand, doesn't have checkering, and it's not finished in terms of the oil finish. We sort of tape it up and seal it. I mean, we've had guys that have been testing them for 6 months, and they might send it back and go, "Oh, take a mil off the top or off the back," and sort of play with it. And then eventually they go, "Yep, happy with that." And then Sergey final sands it, checkers it, does all the finishing and everything, and it looks $1 million at the end of it.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw that, I was at a gun shop and they were in a rack, and I kind of went, I'd only used this, the really entry level rifles and shotguns, and I remember seeing the first Beretta shotgun that had the unfinished stock. I'm like, what's this? Is that like a
boat paddle on the end?
Is that like a storage device? Is it like a pack in, to stop it from getting scratched on the shelf or something?
Yeah.
I used to shoot the DT11, and I remember when I took it to a friend to get a adjustable plate put on the back of the stock, so I could put twist and everything in it. And as he was drilling into that stock, felt like I was counting the $100 notes pouring out of the drill bit hole as the walnut hit the floor. It's an expensive piece of gear.
Yeah, well, you'd hate to see how much wood gets removed off one of those inletted blanks.
Well, would they?
Yeah.
They're a fairly sizable chunk of timber.
Absolutely, yeah.
When I got my stock built for the 3006, it took about 3 hours to select the timber, because he was obviously it was already a purchased rifle, so we were selecting the timber for the stock. And that in itself was, as I said, it's a 3 hour process, and you just kind of was going, okay. And then he said, okay, you've got that. So what timber do you want for the end cap? So we went and looking at end cap pieces and so on and so forth. It was that was the first time I'd ever really get anything like that built custom. It's quite an interesting process to go through.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, obviously there's a lot of, that goes into it. Obviously if we have the ability to change the blank out, obviously we keep quite a few spare on the shelf. Sometimes people get the selection and everyone has their own taste. Some like it lighter, darker, swirly bits, non-swirly bits, all the in-betweens. Everyone's their own flair to what they want to have at the end result.
Yeah, someone wants a bit of fiddleback or something through the middle.
Absolutely.
Of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a marble cake, all right. Yeah.
Are you the first point of call then for Australian warranty items that come back?
For our products,
they're coming back through you, and then you're checking stuff out?
Yep, absolutely, yep. So anything that falls under the Beretta products.
What advice would you give to someone that had their rifle run over by a friend?
My first advice would be SSAA insurance is cheap and it's good.
I was going to say, get a new friend.
Yeah, that. I mean, if they're going to fix it for you without, you having to remind them every other day, maybe not get a new friend. But look, it sort of depends. I mean, going back to sort of stock repairs, which obviously we do quite a lot of. I've seen some pretty destroyed-looking pieces of timber, and by the end of it, you go, "Wow, is that the same piece of wood?"
Yeah, right.
Like I said, a lot of people look at it and go, "Oh, that's." We've fixed things that are broken in 2, 3, 4 pieces before. Depending where it breaks, obviously sometimes we might have to fit reinforcing pins through the crack, but sometimes not. Sergey, like I said, is a wizard. There's a lot of, internal stuff that can happen, and so you can't see it from the outside, refinished and all that stuff. And you'd be hard pressed to see it sometimes. So it depends how badly it's been run over, I guess. A photo is probably where, the 1,000-word sort of thing.
If there was no visible damage, what would you check?
No visible damage. I suppose you'd always start with.
So first, my first thought is, how do you know whether a barrel has the slightest little bend in it, which is going to cause you major dramas.
Yeah, look, that would
things
be
like that.
that would be one where I'd say definitely wise to send it in to be inspected by someone who knows what they're looking for.
Yeah.
It sort of
Asking
depends.
for a friend.
Yeah, it can. Like I said, it can depend.
Asking for a friend.
I mean, we've had stuff that I remember one shop had a shop or someone had driven over with a forklift. Yeah, and luckily enough, they'd driven over the rear stock part of it with the forklift, not the barreled action. So obviously it was a timber repair rather than a metal repair, so to speak. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, you can take some photos as a starting thing and get in contact with someone, i.e. us or someone else. I mean, that at least gets the ball rolling and we know sort of what you're talking about. And then if it, is possible from that perspective, then send it in, we can check it out and see what the go is.
Yeah. You've got to think that there's plenty of people walking the mountains out there that accidentally drop a rifle,
Absolutely.
hits a rock, something like that.
Yep.
I've always wondered how hard a drop might need to be for it to be something that needs a safety check.
Yeah.
Not just I've put a dent on it. I've got an old scope here that has been sitting on my desk waiting to go back under lifetime warranty. Because it got dropped, the rifle got dropped when I slipped, and it landed scope down on a rock, so it dented the cap, right? And of course, I'm mid-hunt trip, and I've gone, oh, that's all right, it's just a dented cap, until I tried to take the cap off, which was touching the adjuster dial on the inside. So of course, when I went to take the cap off, it went around and ruined zero.
Yeah.
So there was lots of things that needed to happen there, but it turns out that this scope now no longer adjusts properly, and it needs to go back. Now I can figure that out for myself, but there is a safety aspect that comes with rifles.
Absolutely, yeah. Any
you
type
drop
of
it,
fire,
you could crack
absolutely.
it, you could bend it, you could. Yeah.
Look, I mean, I suppose.
Oh yeah, look, I've seen it. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it can sort of depend, I guess, as part of it on the type of gun, obviously. So a shotgun, I mean, would be more susceptible to a potential problem with the barrels themselves. Obviously, they're thinner. You get a decent size whack in the side of a barrel, and it's basically a barrel obstruction. Other terms, other types of quality of heat treating and stuff on rifle barrels and actions. Like I said, if you're carrying it and you've dropped it onto the dirt, chances are it's probably not really done anything except maybe shifted your zero of the gun. If you dropped it on a pretty sharp rock, I'd probably go, that's probably the start of a bad weekend of hunting. Let's just go home, you have a beer, cry, and then send it in and have at least checked out. But yet again, you'd be surprised. I mean, they are pretty strong. I mean, at the end of the day, think about what a lot of guns have gone through every World War conflict, being thrown at people, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it might not shoot as good, but it does take quite a bit to cause a potential dangerous situation in that regards. You're more likely to get something in the end of the barrel, a bit of water or something. That's 100 times more dangerous than just going, drop my gun on a bit of rock, usually.
Yeah, look, I saw a guy break a styer, the synthetic stock just around the pistol grip once on a hunting trip, actually to Pilliga, strange enough. And that broke, or the start of it breaking, because he split it. He put a split in it, and it opened up, and eventually it peeled off. So if you think the stock kind of did like that on itself because it's synthetic. That all happened because he packed the gun box that it was in the wrong way, and couldn't close it, so put all the pressure on the lid, and that just happened to be the pivot point for that rifle right there on that stock. So 8 hours of driving down to Pilliga, it was just under tension, and it finally gave out there at the pistol grip, and that's what caused it. He did it himself.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 99% of firearm damage would generally be to either the synthetic or timber stocks. Obviously, 10 times weaker than a barrel or an action. But I've seen people drive over actions of cars, that sort of thing. Which, yeah, definitely wouldn't just be picking it up and taking it for a shot afterwards. Yeah, like I said, it is very much depends on what has happened.
Yeah. Well, I broke a loophole that again.
I was with you on
with
that one,
John. Yeah. It was and what happened was it had the so it was a 3-dial scope, and when I had it slung over my shoulder on my left hand side, that dial that was on the inside caught and pulled off. And, so we went, oh, hang on, we're in a bit of trouble here. So we gaffer taped it at 100 yards. We re-sighted 100 yards and then gaffer taped the whole thing and this big ball of gaffer tape. So it was it. It said it was in 100 yards. I've got range after that. There was nothing. But yeah, but it still worked. But yeah. Certainly, that's the only really time I've broken any gear in the scrub, and I've had it, get knocked around, but it was the only time I've ever broken it.
Yeah.
Well, this scope that I was talking about, it might have been the beginning to a bad hunt, Byron, but I was 14 hours drive from home. I'd not been there very long, and I was supposed to be there for a week, so I wasn't leaving.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So similar situation to Mark, I bore-sighted it. And I knew that anything within 50 metres I was dangerous, but I wasn't going home after a trip from Queensland to Victoria, that's for sure.
Sometimes that's why having backup iron sights is a good idea.
Yeah, well, you don't see that anymore, do you?
Not a lot.
That was once, almost. It was almost, the standard have iron sights on the barrel and in the action, and then have a scope on top.
Absolutely.
So Byron, you mentioned synthetic and timber stocks, and many of us hunt with synthetic stocks now because obviously they're lighter, and we've been told that they're not affected by moisture, and that are timber stocks really heavily affected by moisture if you're moving from, say, Queensland up into the high country or something like that? Is it a big difference for us to consider synthetic stocks?
Look, it can be. I mean, it sort of depends on how it's treated as well, and the different types of timber stocks, obviously laminates and solid and even different species of timber. Look, it is something to maybe consider. I mean, generally speaking, the biggest issue with a timber that you want to consider is, water ingress or moisture ingress, and then changing the humidity point again. So, if you're out hunting and it's absolutely raining cats and dogs, and then you finish for the day, chuck it in the car, and you drive home 8 hours and the heater running full bore, that, it can cause problems. You can get cracks and splits and things like that, or at the very least, it'll affect the finish of the stock. But in saying that, I mean, if it's a high quality piece of timber that's been treated correctly and finished correctly, and you maintain it properly, not such a huge issue. Obviously, there is still the potential, unlike synthetics. I mean, that's probably why it's more popular now. Synthetic, you don't really have to think too much about it. Whereas, timber, I mean, shotgun's a prime example. If someone shoots in the wet weather or it rains a little bit, there's usually a lot of cleaning and stock conditioning and oiling and drying things out. I mean, it can happen for sure.
I suppose synthetics, the other, is not a generic. It's a generic term, but it's certainly not a generic product.
Absolutely not.
You can go from basically blowform plastic all the way through to carbon fiber and then mixed carbon, like that MESA stock. That's a glass composite mixed carbon stock. So, and that's the first synthetic stock that I've rifle I've ever had. I've had laminate timber and timber, but that MESA is the first one that was really truly a synthetic stock.
I mean, straight to the upper end of it.
That's the thing. That thing's bulletproof. It's but there again, it's. I mean, I remember the Tikka T3, the Tikka Light, the black. It was almost like a blowform type of stock. That it was they actually, I think they put more filler in it the next time around because it was actually a super lightweight thing. But you could almost feel it drumming when you shot it.
Yeah, like synthetic stocks obviously vary in their composition and quality, and even the materials. They're definitely not all created equal. And I have seen some stuff, from yet again, changes in temperature can do some strange things to synthetics if they're sort of on the lower end of quality. You can have bends start or it's, like I said, it's very uncommon nowadays, but I have seen a few of them. And then the other one is obviously the surface treatments they put on them, whether if there might be a soft touch or some sort of rubberized coating on them can go bad with exposure to UV and humidity.
Yeah,
absolutely, still can happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, humidity being the big one. That's it. I mean, that's a perennial problem from about September right through to April, May.
Yep.
I was trying to remember
I go through those, those humidity tub things, those crystal things. I go through one of them every couple of weeks in the safe.
Yeah, don't have that problem so much down here in Melbourne.
Yeah, no, I literally go to Bunnings, buy a bundle of them, and they just, every couple of weeks throw them out. They're just full of water.
Just be careful of those, Mark, because if they leak on your rifle, you're going to have some issues.
Well, I put them at the bottom of the safe.
Yeah,
so.
I had one.
Gravity being what it is.
I had one which leaked on a rifle.
You damaged a rifle
and onto my 9.3, and it's actually going down to Byron to be fixed up. So.
Oh,
so we're going to be putting Byron's skills to the test on my 9.3, which is going to be Cerakoted and treated with that Beretta Love. So we'll see how it comes back. So
yeah.
So while you're talking about that, tell us about this best coating that the Lupos have got, and can I get it on something else? That shit is bloody good.
I really do wish. Look, that is a proprietary coating, and to be honest, it's still quite a bit of secrecy around the entire process of how it's made.
Oh, okay.
Even like I said, I'm not fully aware of all the details of it, but let's say Benelli have spent a lot of money and a lot of machinery acquisitions, but it's very similar to a DLC process. With some tweaks and changes to how they do it, but it is.
What does that mean to the average hunter?
What's a DLC process?
So it can vary in how it's done. So it's a surface infusion that they do to it, and basically it creates a super hard sort of scale or layer to the outside of it, if you will, and that is why they're so scratch resistant or just wear resistant. Full stop. So
it's bloody good.
Yeah.
It is so good. Yeah.
It is impressive. In our showroom down in head office here in Melbourne, we actually have sort of like a example that Benelli sent us there, where they do sort of saltwater erosion tests with them, and compared to just a regular steel blued barrel, all sorts of stuff like that. I think it was a week-long saltwater exposure or something like that. But, a long time. And obviously, look, don't get me wrong, it got affected, but they've got one here, the best treatment, and then just a regular barrel, and the regular barrel looks like it was underwater for, 10 years. And the best looks like it was in there for maybe an hour. So, it was something like a week, in a very high salt environment, which is, as brutal of a test as you can for rust, really. But, it is a very impressive coating. Comes in a few different finishes now, other than just the shiny one. There's also a matte version of it as well. So look, it's incredibly, incredibly hard. I haven't seen anything quite like it anywhere else.
Wow.
Neither have I. And noticeably smooth in the action.
Absolutely.
Like I know the inside the action doesn't have that coating, but the bolt does. And just the pickup of the round with the bolt, you almost don't feel the resistance. Yeah, well,
obviously the other part of it, obviously, it's very, very hard, but it's also very, very smooth in terms of its surface finish. And being that it's such a hard coating, and the wear of them on each other, they tend to slide rather than cut into each other, and that's sort of the idea and purpose of that part of it. And that's why they're like glass. It's a bit like two pieces of glass sliding on each other is the best way to explain it.
Yeah, very impressed.
Wow, haven't seen that one. I mean, I haven't seen it. I've seen them in the shop, and I saw those rifles. saw them go through my hands, the other guy. But
If I could get the machine here, I would.
They're not lefty, so I really wasn't that interested, and they weren't lefty, so I wasn't that interested. But yeah, I haven't had anything to do with it, but certainly I know Ian was raving about it and said, "Can we get everything?"
Yeah, we were asking that question, but
I just want everything with that best coating on.
Send the patrol down, send everything, just go to everything.
Do everything, fishing rod, the whole 9 yards, everything.
That's it.
I made a joke in passing of the big boss at Beretta and said, "Hey, we should get the process and the machine here to do it." And he looked at me and went, "You have no idea how much that setup costs."
Really?
It's a very, very intricate, very obviously labor intensive, and not something you probably. I mean, you could set it up on a smaller scale, I imagine, but it's more of a mass-produced level to make.
I'm happy. I'm happy to send all my other rifles to Benelli. I don't need to buy all the gear.
That's right. Well,
help a fella out.
Yeah, well, look,
we'll just get a container.
Yeah.
We'll get a single container, put everything in it, and send it back to Italy, and say just coat everything.
Not sure how that would go
Phones,
down.
the whole
look,
lot.
I could ask the question.
You know people, right? That's the main thing.
Phones, that's right. Yeah.
While we're on the subject of maintenance, lots of schools have thought about barrel cleaning with hunting rifles.
That's a
and I know
very loaded question nowadays.
Oh well, it's 45 minutes in. Let's get That's right. It's 45 minutes in. Time to get let's get the controversy going.
It's a tough one because gunsmiths, by their nature, are very fussy people when it comes to what they do. So clean is, the way they like stuff. But I don't know. There's two schools of thought.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's probably more than two, but I guess it sort of can depend on what your purpose is with the gun and how it sort of reacts to having a bit of carbon fouling or copper fouling. There is definitely two schools of thought. I mean, some of the high end target shooters never clean their guns ever, and still win awards and trophies and all the middle yards of it. And then I have seen the other side of it where someone cleans over the top and damages the rifling with a poor quality cleaning rod and stuff like that. Look, personally, with my own guns, I always put some oily patches through it when I'm finished shooting, and then some dry patches. That's the bare minimum, and that's if I've been shooting all day. I get home and I'm like, look, I'm not gonna get high off hoppies or bloody sweet 7.62 for the next hour. I'm gonna clean and put them away and maybe come back another time. But I guess it really does depend. I mean, a lot of target shooters now, I would probably say, clean a lot harder when the gun accuracy drops off a little bit, and they sort of just do that routine, maybe get rid of the carbon, but not so much a heap of the copper fouling. In terms of hunting, I would say personally, you got more risk of corrosion versus an accuracy problem. I mean, the gun's going to shoot better than you can hunting, probably for a whole life, even when the barrel's worn out. So, definitely. Yeah. In terms of a maintenance side of things, oiling and drying, obviously, the excess oil out of it, and keeping on top of that would be number one. But I mean, it's like everything. Some people don't wash their cars ever. They haven't for 20 years. Some people wash them once a week religiously. I suppose it really is a personal preference thing, so long as you're not doing it to the point of detriment or damaging the gun, would probably be the best piece of advice I could give you without reining in a lot of controversy.
Good advice. Yeah. I'm happy with that advice. I'm okay with it.
And
that's up my direction.
From my perspective, I was always told you should, with a barrel, you should shoot a barrel. When you first get a new rifle, you should shoot that barrel in. I have heard with the modern hammer forged barrels, you don't have to do that. Is Correct. That accurate? Should you shoot a barrel in?
I've yet again had the experience of having, obviously brand new guns from Tikka or Seiko come through, and we might, do some testing with whatever they are, and we basically pull them out of the packet. I always put just one little bit of cleaning solution through the barrel with some patches, obviously to get rid of any oil or anything that the manufacturer's probably pumped in there for corrosion resistance during shipping. Straight down to the range and just start whacking away rounds, and they shoot better than I can any day of the week. And that is just part of the way with them, with hammer forging. It's very consistent. You don't have, so much tight spots and things like that, or variation that shooting in the barrel, so to speak, would remove or improve upon. So yeah, I guess it depends on how the barrel's made is probably the biggest key to it. If it's a hammer forged barrel, most of the time manufacturers would sort of say, just shoot it. Like I said, Tikka and Sega 100%. You pull it out of the pack, give it its one sort of clean, and away you go. But if it's a more traditional, cut rifling or button rifle, then yeah, generally you still want to keep to that, shoot clean sort of arrangement that most people do.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's one of those things that always generates an argument. I was always told that you run in a barrel, and what I liked about the idea of running in a barrel, especially if it's a new shooter, is that it makes them think about what's happening with the rifle.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you have your first 20 rounds. So you got a new rifle and you got your box of ammo. If you're a new shooter and you just start punching through rounds and you don't understand what's actually happening, why is it landing where it is and things like that, you can expend a lot of ammo and not have a sighted-in rifle. If you actually approach it like you're running it in, it makes you actually think about each shot. Because the way I used to run in was basically the first 20 was I'd do 5 one-shots and then I'd go to 2s and that way. And I found it always made me think more about the rifle itself. And that was even with rifles that I get to review, I'll still do that process to start because it just kind of settles you in and go, okay, this is where it's throwing, this is where this is what the scope's telling me, but this is what the rifle's telling me.
Yeah.
I was at the range a couple of months ago, and it was exactly happening. There was a father and son. Old man was a shooter. Was introducing his son. His son was in his early 20s, and they had a near Lithgow, and they were about up to the 4th box of ammo, and they still couldn't basically put it on paper. And they just kind of thought, if I just keep shooting, eventually, it'll kind of all come together, type thing. And literally in about, just talking to them and working with them within, 5 or 6 shots, we were on paper. And then we started to sight it in at 100 and getting some consistency out of it. So that's why I always liked running it in. Because I always think about it now. I was probably running myself in more to the rifle rather than running the rifle.
Yeah, look, I would say that, look, there's nothing wrong with doing it still to this day. I mean, you're not, obviously, if you're using the right equipment, you're not rushing the job and potentially scratching the bore or whatever. There's nothing wrong with it at all. I mean, there's still plenty of people that would still do it. You're not going to cause any detriment by doing it at all. I suppose the biggest thing would be, it's people's, maybe I've seen a few people who go, oh, well, it's hammer forged barrel. I don't need to run it in. I don't need to clean it. And it sort of stays with that last bit. I don't need to clean it. and then they go that little extra step. No, it's hammer forged. It'll be fine. There's nothing to worry about with, rust or anything like that. And, then lo and behold, oh, my gun doesn't shoot accurately. And you get it and it's fully copper fouled. It's, it's terrible condition. It hasn't been looked after. So yeah, obviously it's hammer forged. The gun still needs to be looked after. It still needs to be maintained. So yeah, I mean, the running in thing, absolutely. Still, if you want to do it, for sure, on a hammer forged gun, you can. Doesn't hurt anything. But if you went and picked up the gun on a Friday and you've got a hunt organised on Saturday, no worries.
So if we expand cleaning out to maintenance, what would be your recommendation for maintenance?
Yet again, it depends on the type of gun and its configuration. So,
well, let's. Most of our listeners are hunters, and so they're going to be shooting something that is primarily what you might describe as a hunting rifle. That's a pretty broad, but I suppose if we stick within that, we're talking about, bolt action, typically bolt action rifle, probably a 30 cal or somewhere in that space, repeater, something like that. What are we thinking about maintenance wise? As in, let's start with preventative maintenance. So what should we kind of think about doing before we take it out?
Okay, so number one is always oil. Oil is your friend on everything. It doesn't mean you have to dunk it in it, but you obviously always want to stay on top of any rust or corrosion. Obviously, going out in the hunt, you're going to get moisture, you're going to get rain, you're going to get mud and everything like that and in between. So, you know, I suppose from the pulling it out of the safe, if you've been cleaning and oil the gun, the first thing I'd always say would be put a dry patch through the gun, make sure there's no huge accumulation of oil in the bore that can potentially be dangerous. I guess from there would be the sort of the once over, make sure everything's as it was when you put it in the safe and hasn't fallen or changed or anything like that. But in terms of preventative into the field, really the only thing would be to go look in the weather, go, oh look, it's going to rain. I put some anti-rust sort of coating, like, you know, some of those wipes you can buy from the shop, or just some oil on a rag, light sort of coating on the metalwork. And then if it's a timber stock, would be a conditioning product or a protectant product for your timber. So not gun oil, something, you know, there's heaps of brands that make stuff that basically just adds a very thin, very watered down coat of something like linseed oil or something like that, which gives it a little bit of resistance to rain and moisture and stuff. That would be, you know, going out there, finished for the day, coming home. Bore snakes are great for a quick, you know, clean, maybe get rid of any moisture or something inside the barrel before you get into the car. And then, you know, and the same thing as well. Every time I go to the range or I go out anywhere, it's oil in a rag in my, you know, gun bag or whatever. Give it a quick wipe down. If it's gotten super, super wet, not always a good idea to put it into a gun bag. You're creating a, you know, potentially humid environment, or trapping moisture into your bag, and that you can put a gun in, and especially where you guys are, put a wet gun into a bag and pull it out 2 hours later and it'll be rusty. So, you know, there's obviously other options, even leaving the bag open a little bit. Get home and then it's the cleaning sort of thing, and yet the oiling and preventative maintenance. I think some people overthink it a little bit too much sometimes.
I use silicone socks for everything. I found that's probably the best way for us here in Queensland to battle. You can't defeat it, but battle humidity. So everything's in a silicone sock as well.
They do make silicone rags as well, which work quite well.
Yeah, I do use them, but the you know, the socks are nearly always built for shotguns, so you have to kind of
stretch act,
stretch over, maybe modify them a little bit with the scissors. But yeah, I put everything in silicone socks, and I find and they're cheap as chips, and you know, you get them in 4-packs, so you can cover off most things. The other thing for me for maintenance that it's a personal thing is that, and everyone who hunts, if you've got a rifle sling, please put oil on the sling mounts, because there's nothing will hunt worse than hunting with someone that's going
the squeak. Yeah.
And then look, the other one that goes with that is put leather conditioner on your leather sling, 100%. I mean, I suppose you have to look at a rifle as a sum of parts, you know, different components and how each component is maintained. Same thing with scopes. The amount of scopes I get sent to me that have God knows what on the front lens of them, you know, whether it's spit, sweat, blood, who knows? I don't want to know. I don't want to think about it a bit. But I said, the scope's really hard to see through, and you look at the front of it and go, oh, I wonder why. You know, lens cleaners and wipes, you know, things like that. Doesn't have to be super, super complicated, but just look at it and go, okay, well, that's steel, blued, not, you know, and the other things, stainless gun, I don't need to oil it. No, that's. I wish that conception would stop. But stainless guns, you still need to put oil on them. They stain less, not stain proof.
And stainless meaning they stain less, not that it's stainless steel, right?
Stainless steel? No, stainless steel is what I'm talking about. Stains less, not proof. Yeah, still got to put oil on it. Still got to keep an eye on it. You know, and different types of stainless have different sort of corrosion resistance, but that's the word. That's the word is resistance. It's not impervious. It's not bulletproof against it. So it's yet again something that keep in consideration. You know,
I for some reason I always found that I had a CZ, and that was very susceptible to rust and mold on the timber stock, and rust on the barrel. Or the beginnings of rust on the barrel, where it could be sitting next to a rifle of a different brand, and that rifle wouldn't have anything on it, but the CZ wouldn't. And so I don't know exactly what it is in the composition or the manufacturing process, but I found that particular one was always really susceptible. I haven't really had too much problems with that. CZ was the challenge. That was the one that I had to really look after, especially through summer. It would start to bloom on the stock. The mold would just bloom up on the stock. Couldn't figure it out why.
Yeah, it's interesting, like different ways they're manufactured. From a bead blast finish on steel to high polish, different sort of resistance to it. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't consider is you're even the person using it. I know some people have sweat hands. They're very acidic, alkaline sweat that eats into that stuff very, very quickly. I could see, I oil my guns all the time, but did you oil them before you handled it, put it away? That can be problems. You can end up with a fingerprint on the side of a barrel or something like that. All manner of things. Yeah, but absolutely the way the gun's finished, if it's polished, not polished, bead blasted, if it's got file marks because it's 80 years old and was made using a bastard file, it obviously all changes depending on that.
I haven't seen file marks. That'd be interesting.
Well, you obviously haven't shot a Russian Mosin then.
No, I haven't. I've seen plenty of them, but I've never shot one. But next time I see one, I'm going to have to look for file marks. I've got something here that's 300 years old that's got no file marks on it.
Not all guns are created equal.
No, obviously not. So, I mean, that's the kind of the when things go wrong. So, I mean, luckily I've never spoken to you about problems. We've always spoken about, cool stuff to do. So what's the kind of, if I want to customize, and this is another argument, is it a custom rifle or is it customized? So what are the things that mostly you're doing for people who want to upgrade or improve their gear?
I mean, we offer quite a vast different amount of services at Beretta Australia. Try and add more all the time. But look, the big ones are obviously rebarreling services. Cerakoting is a very large one. Part interchanging, lightning, things like that. So, I mean, there is a lot of stuff you can do. We don't do all of it. It's not always the easiest thing to do a million different jobs at once. But yeah, look, I mean, Cerakoting is obviously a very obvious one to a lot of people. Stock replacements or changes to the stock, might be something as simple as making the stock longer because you might be really tall, or shortening because you might be shorter. Could be changing the finish of the stock because you don't like it shiny, you want it a satin finish. Could be shortening the barrel slightly because you feel it's too long. Could be putting a muzzle thread on it. Could be simple or can be complicated. So I guess it sort of depends on the number one thing with customizing a rifle is what do you want to achieve with it? What's your goal? What's the idea for it? Is the number one thing. If you go, well, it's a hunting gun, I want it light as possible, or I want it exactly this weight, or I want this balance to it. It gives you some ideas of where to go. That's the number one, is working out the end result. Like we spoke about when we did the Indie rifle with you, what did you want to use it for? What was weight a huge consideration? Was length a consideration? And then it boils all the way to what colours do you like? What colours do you not like? You really, I mean, it sort of depends on how deep the rabbit hole you want to go down. Do you want engraving on it? So...
Well, it got
exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, there's obviously modifications to improve a gun, and then there's more of the aesthetic sort of stuff, engraving and crazy color schemes, Cerakotes and things like that. But from a functional point, it's changing the balance of the weight. Obviously, the accuracy, if that's something else, trigger pull weight, etc. The list can go on and on and on. So that's always my recommendation to someone, to work out what they want to achieve with the gun, and then we can sort of work out how to get there.
Well, for me, I just didn't want to create the Homermobile. That was my first thing. I was scared that we'd create this thing. It's like, and have so many parts on it that it actually wouldn't function at all. But I mean, so, you mentioned accuracy. What's the options there in terms of gunsmithing for accuracy? I mean, obviously, there's many parts of accuracy, one being the load itself, but from a rifle point of view, what are you looking at in terms of improving accuracy on a hunting rifle?
The hunting rifle side of things, I mean, it depends on the base rifle to begin with. Not all hunting rifles are obviously the same design of bedding in the receiver and area and stuff like that, or recoil lug, even the barrel design itself and the taper and length of it, just into the general part of the barrel quality itself. If you've got something that's maybe 40, 50 years old, it's obviously going to be worn out. The barrel might have been made, obviously, on older technology. It might not be that good to begin with. Obviously a big one for accuracy is to change the barrel. Sometimes, and that can also be done for the weight side of thing, put a carbon fiber barrel on it. Not only is it lighter, generally it's stiffer, better heat dissipation. The weight is probably the one thing people think about the most. But, you can go into action truing and alignment, glass bedding, pillar bedding. Changing the entire stock will sometimes make the gun shoot better, sometimes worse. It sort of depends on a bit of a case by case of what is the gun, and maybe identifying if there is a problem with the gun or where that problem might be. If you go, I've got a gun that shoots 1 inch constantly and consistently as a hunting gun, and some people go, no, I want it to shoot better than that for a hunting gun. Fair enough. Sometimes you have to have that conversation is, can you shoot better with that gun hunting? That's sometimes, some people don't think about that, but if you want to drive 5 rounds through one hole, fair enough, I'm not going to stop you. It really does depend on how you want to achieve that, some of the ideas for it. So I remember I think we spoke about a carbon fiber barrel on yours when we were sort of going through that design thing, and I think you sort of didn't want it too light, which is always a smart idea. Sometimes you don't want a super, super light rifle. They're not fun to shoot sometimes.
Yeah, for me personally, it was more the fact, and this might be wrong, but I suppose this is what you're getting at in terms of the individual. I've always found that for an offhand shot, I actually want a bit of weight in the rifle.
Yeah.
I want it to kind of sit, to sink a little bit. You obviously, it's a balance. You don't want it too heavy where you're actually straining to hold it. But, a super light rifle in an offhand shot, doesn't give me confidence as well. It's the fact that I did want some weight in the rifle. It's a 308. It was a 20-inch barrel. It's not going to be, it's not going to boot that hard anyway. But it was more about I wanted to have that. It felt really well, and that was all based on the fact that back in 2018 I was given up that opportunity to do a 10-day hunt with a CDR, and kind of realised how much I liked the way it was set up and the weight of it. So I didn't want to play too much around that. For me, the big kind of experiment was the stock, and the fact that it used that that vertical grip, and it had quite a high comb. That I wasn't used to that, but I found that I really, really like shooting that. But that was one of the things. I think one of the things about any kind of customizing work like this is you're actually going to have to experiment a little bit.
Yeah.
You have to accept that it's, if you're going to change something so dramatically and you're used to one thing, it's going to feel different to you no matter how good you put it together. When you put it on your body, it's going to feel different because it is different. So you've got to be able to really get ready to actually accept, okay, this does feel different. It's a different grip. It's a different situation. It's a different setup on my cheek and things like that.
Yeah,
so,
that can also come into a balance point as well. Is something a lot of people don't always think about is, they go, oh, I just want a really, really light gun. But balance can change that dramatically. You might have something that's really, really light overall, but has a bit more weight up sort of on the front end of it. And you might find that it's still can shoot off hand, because you've got that balance that's sort of pulling you more forward. Whereas if the opposite's true, if it's real balanced in the rear end of it, you're going to find it very difficult to shoot off hand. Then it might be a little bit skittish and off target and stuff like that. So there's many things to consider, especially if it's something, you want to do a drastic or dramatic, custom, one-off sort of gun.
So, with that too, there's a lot of, you like everything, there's trends in firearms. And the practical rifle setup with the chassis style of rifle has been coming. You see them more and more now, and they're I've actually seen some guys hunt with them. I actually think that's way too hard for me to do that. But certainly, it's a personal choice. But yeah, you see, so you're actually getting that, I suppose, much more towards a target platform that's being used in various situations rather than a hunting rifle.
I mean, obviously something that's very, very popular over in America and stuff, and is sort of obviously catching on here is there's a lot of people that are doing long range hunting, So generally speaking, the weight consideration of the gun kind of goes a little bit out the window in some aspect of it, because you've got an idea plan for where you're going to go. You're not going to be lugging the thing for kilometers and kilometers through a jungle. You're going to pull up in the car, maybe walk however far and set up and watch over things and have the gun set up on maybe a bipod or a sandbag, rests, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, there's those sort of guys that do that. There's a little bit more of a crossover sort of style of shooting, I suppose you could say. Always something to consider. Everyone likes shooting things differently and has different styles for doing things. But that's the idea of making something for someone.
Yeah, I mean the Sarco S20 is a really good example of that. That's getting to a level of modularization where you can really customize that in a retail sense, basically buy the customized pieces and go for it. I was really impressed with that rifle when I got it, and it's a 300 Win Mag, and it was certainly no slouch, but the ability to customize it was pretty impressive. You used one down in Victoria, didn't you, John?
Yeah, we shot them at the Beretta dealer day. There was a couple of them around. It was good fun. I love that.
Yeah, they're an interesting thing. I had the hunting one, the ergonomic, and it was a completely different setup that I was used to. And the fact that there's like three or four locking bolts, and you can change stock and the whole lot and go through. And then even when you get into when you turn into a custom target rifle, you get the little bits. You get, I can't think of it, but the little screw-in monopod that goes into the bottom of the stock, and all that kind of really cool stuff. It's barricade stops. I thought I've never used one of them before, but anyway.
But even the Benellis, the way they come out the box are very customizable. You can change your, the length of pull. You can adjust the comb. You can do all of that. They're great rifles. You don't need to go the custom route if you need to adjust it to fit your body and your needs, really.
Yeah, I mean, they've got pitch adapters and all sorts of stuff
and
like
the BRX.
that. And BRX has similar features to it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the BRX, interchangeable barrels, right? You get the bolt face and you get the extra barrel. I have not yet, I'm not the smartest rifle guy out there. I don't understand all of the bits and pieces and components. I like to shoot them. I enjoy hunting. I don't reload. I don't do any of that. It comes out of the box on the way I go. I make it fit me rather than the other way around, which is why I've got a bruise on my forehead from the weekend. Not as bad as my mates. But
that's what happens when you use a 7.
How are the legalities of the interchangeable barrels going to work? Because people are saying that I can go and buy a 308 barrel for the 3006, but I don't have a PTA for a 308.
Yeah, so I'll
how does the mechanics of this work? And is it the same in every state?
I'll preface this by saying I'm not going to give advice for the entire of Australia, but I can give you, I can at least tell you here in Victoria. So, and it applies to other states, some other states. There's obviously the control parts of the firearm, and generally speaking, the control part is the action or the receiver of the firearm. That's the one you're putting the permit in for.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a barrel is not technically a controlled or permitted part. So it is controlled in the fact you can't import them into Australia without Governor General's approval and things like that. But if it's here in the country already, you can buy it. You have a firearms license that allows you to own that component of the gun. It's not it's not considered. It's not considered a control part. It's not the most critical part of the gun. I mean, most people go, well, it's the barrel, it's where the bullet comes out of, that's the most critical part, and it's not. It's really, generally speaking, is the receiver. The action itself is the part, because that's, I suppose, what everything bolts to would be the easiest way of explaining it. So, yeah, you can buy barrels on Beretta Australia's website, things like that. And, I mean, obviously you have to present a valid firearms license, but it's perfectly legal for you to purchase it and to have them. And I mean, that sort of thing, and the reason BRX sort of did that, and a lot of other manufacturers are doing this, because, say, in Europe, there is a restriction on the amount of firearms you can own. So instead of, I mean, I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but it's not many. It's like 2 or 3 or something like that. So to sort of get around that, they go, well, okay, we'll just have one gun that can have 10 different calibers, and that's what they do, and that's the idea of sort of the blazer and things like that. The receiver never changes; the serial number is always the same, but the barrel bolt, if necessary, can be changed out. Because at the end of the day, if you have a barrel, you don't have the receiver, it fits to. It's not a gun. It's not a gun until it's on there. It's not going to do anything. It's just a piece of metal. That's all it is.
True.
No, I think the reason it scratched my head was because I was told, and maybe this is incorrect, and I'd love to check on it again. I might have to do some Googling in a minute. But I was told that if you disposed of your 308 and it came off your license and list of rifles in Queensland, you were no longer legally allowed to own 308 rounds. You had to dispose of the rounds with it. You can't keep rounds for a rifle you don't have. So I don't have. No, and I'm not expecting you to have that answer. I just think the mechanics in this country can be quite.
I know.
difficult.
I'm not sure if it's still the case. Like I said, take it with a grain of salt. But in New South Wales, for example, if you don't have the caliber of firearm on your license, or you don't own that caliber, you can't purchase that ammunition.
Right. So how do you then own the 308 caliber? You've got to go through a PTA.
Great question. I don't know the answer to it. I'm sorry.
Right. There's no serial number on that barrel.
There is actually a serial number on the barrel, but it's not used as a permitted serial number. It's more of a manufacturer.
Yeah, that's right. The permits for the
but all the barrels that they manufacture do have a number on them. So I suppose in that term, I suppose you could get a permit for them. I mean, I said it is a tricky one. I mean, here in Victoria, you have no issue. You can have different barrel sets for guns and things. I mean, obviously you can buy guns that come with multiple barrel sets, interchangeable barrels. So I mean, it would be probably a grey area. I'm not 100% on the legality of that one, but
So it's not the barrel, it's the ammo, isn't it? It's not the barrel, it's the ammo. Yeah, it's the ammo.
I'm not sure if they're both not a problem. Because the other thing here is that you're not allowed to modify specific components of a rifle here. You can't change its caliber without going through a paperwork process.
That boils into the fact that the gun, when you say, for instance, you buy a BRX as a 308 and registered, that's what you put the permit in for. You're not actually changing the caliber of the receiver. That's what it boils down to. So if you have a traditional, say, Tikka or Seiko, it's a fixed barrel, doesn't come on and off. That's what it's registered as. Whereas the BRX is obviously it's a switch barrel caliber, and I mean part of the process of importing them is that they have a classification of the gun. So somewhere on their database it might say it's a switch barrel rifle. So that sort of creates an exemption from it. With the ammunition side of thing, I think you'll probably find that if you have here in Victoria, it's an AB rifle license, for example. If I have a B rifle license, I can purchase any rifle ammunition, because the argument is that I might be buying my friend some ammo or using his rifle. So I have the license to own that series of guns. I might not own one, but I can operate one and use it legally. Whereas if you try to buy handgun ammo without a handgun license, that can be, in some states, is where it's more probably the issue. So if you've got normal rifle, you probably more than likely find, like I said, I can't guarantee it from the legal point.
I think it's interpretation more than anything, mate.
I know with
I'm not sure if the
pistol
rule is
ammo.
for real.
I know with pistol ammo, so I was at the range once with Helena when we first started going out, and they I'd been a member of SSAA for about 20 years then, and I'd never been allowed in the pistol cage. And the first time I took Helena there, she got invited to the pistol cage. And so I went, okay, sure. And we had 38, and I bought a couple of boxes of 38 for her to burn through, and I gave them back at the end of the day because I didn't want to put 38 in my safe because I don't have
The
a
thing
pistol.
there, though, is that you can get rifles
So,
with that
yeah,
caliber
I-
in a rifle. So, yeah,
No, yeah, well, I didn't. That very
Yeah.
38 is an example. It could have been a 357, but the idea that at the instance was I didn't have a rifle with that ammo, and so I thought, oh yeah, I'll just give it back
look,
to
the
them. And I gave it
best
back.
piece of advice I can give in that sort of regard is send an email to your local police department that does the licensing. It's about the
I'm
easiest
actually
way
going
around.
to ask Glenn down at On Target about that because
Yeah.
that's where we'd be getting them through. So yeah, it'd be interesting because certainly the BRX with the 9.3 options are, a 308 and a 9.3 up in the territory. That'd be
beautiful.
Yeah.
hell
Spot
on
on.
wheels.
Like I said, you'll find that there will be some legislative way that it's been done. Like I said, I can't comment. I'm not super familiar with Queensland state laws, and I know what we are down here. But yeah, every state's a little bit different in how it does things, and that creates its own problems and headaches.
Yeah.
So I know, Mike, you brought up pistols, and obviously Beretta make pistols. Are you guys doing custom pistol builds and things
absolutely.
like that for competitive shooters?
Yeah, so we
Oh,
do
yeah.
work on everything: pistols, rifles, shotguns, the whole 9 yards. So I mean, we just actually started doing a custom line of pistols from the workshop. So we modify the 92X performance steel frame gun into a platform for what in IPSC shooting called the standard division. Has its own sort of set of rules and setups for the guns, sort of sets it apart from, say, a production type pistol. But yeah, we do trigger works on stuff, obviously component fitting and Cerakoting, repair works, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, absolutely.
That 92X is the one we really like. I really like that.
Yeah,
pistol.
we got to shoot them at the aim point day,
Yeah,
and then at the Beretta dealer day, we got to shoot some pistols as well.
Yeah. So we had
I know we had one of the custom.
we had a couple of custom ones down there on the dealer day.
I shot that one. That was beautiful.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So we do all that sort of stuff. Like I'm a big pistol shooter myself, along with rifles and that sort of stuff. So yeah, we do shotgun work, rifles and pistols and all everything in between, essentially.
Do you do the standard setup for the is it the M9?
The standard
the
version
Beretta
of the
M9?
Beretta 92 series of pistols. Yeah, so look, there are parts you can put onto them that sort of come down to a model spec. The 92X is different frame and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, there's one in the Berettas. Is it the M9? It's the or is it something? It's the one that's the Coyote
M9A3
Cerakote
is
color.
that one.
Is that the M?
Yeah.
M9A3. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, we got parts that we fit to those to customize them as well. Like mag wells and grip panels, all sorts of stuff for them. There is a lot of stuff that you can do to them, especially if you're willing to maybe wait for some stuff to come from somewhere. Like, I mean, America obviously has huge, vast quantities of options of parts, whether it be a compensator or big, heavy bull barrel, all sorts of stuff. I mean, yeah, pistols you can get. If you go to any sort of IPSC or open competition of pistol shooting, you can see some crazy modifications done to pistols to get them that little bit of extra point score and stuff like that. Useless for anything else, perfect for that competition. It's obviously built for the purpose of that. So there's lots and lots of stuff you can do for sure.
Okay. I was going to say, now that you've got Jono's rifle, for some reason it won't chamber 9.3 by 66, by the way. There's something wrong with it.
And that little piggy went to market
That's
all on its own, unscratched.
What gun is it, mate?
It's a SAL 100 in 9.3 by 6.2.
By 60.
Yeah, and we went to
Not
the territory and we had some ammunition sent up, and we're not trying to throw Beretta Australia under the bus here, but they sent one box of 9.3 by 66.
Ooh.
And
Seiko.
I just looked at 9.3 by 6 and thought, that's going to work. And the first morning we were a bit tired and whatever, but we came up on a pig, and I went up to go and I tried to chamber this round, and the bolt just wouldn't close.
Good. That's good that it didn't,
because it was, yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Look, yeah.
And tried a few different rounds, and what was going on, and then I looked at the head stamp and it said 9.3 by 66, and I'm like, I'm not shooting a 9.3 by 66.
I think I might have a 9.366 reamer at work. To be honest, we can make that work if you want.
Well, the rifle's going to be working pretty soon, mate. Just make it work. That's all.
It was the first game animal we saw on the trip, and it was this pig came down the creek. I was going, oh, pig, quick. You had the camera set up and click.
And the rifles just wouldn't close. Yeah, the bolt just wouldn't close.
Not good.
Right.
Yeah,
Never mind. After last weekend,
pigs. Oh, pigs! Who needs them? They're everywhere. Hundreds.
Yeah, well, look, let's put it this way: it always pays to double check before you go.
Absolutely, and that was a lesson.
Yeah,
lesson learned from that one is check that. Yeah, make sure you're shooting the right ammunition and the right rifle, especially if you've got multiple calibers. Make sure you're picking up the right ammunition for the right rifle.
Absolutely,
definitely a lesson learned on that one. It could be catastrophic, luckily it wasn't. But yeah.
That's right.
It was more. I think I was more worried about Mike just shouting at me and biting my head off for not shooting the pig.
There was a fair bit of swearing and sign language going on.
Shoot the
pig. Should have just thrown the loaded round at it. Probably would have been.
Well, he wasn't that far away. It wasn't that far away. A little boar came down. It came down the water and it turned around. It was just going up. We're going, oh, there it is. Oh, look.
That's good fun. But yeah, the rifle hitting your way, Byron.
So Byron, all these customization services that you've got in the workshop, I'm assuming they're open to. They're obviously open to people that are buying new rifles. They're open to people that have got rifles that would like to send them to you. Are you fussy if someone sends you a non-Beretta brand? Do you have the tooling for that, or is there a limit?
We always start the conversation of obviously trying emails or phone calls about what they want to do, and obviously if we can do that for them. So yeah, I mean, there's always the consideration if it's something weird or exotic, it might have a specific maybe jig or barrel tool, for example, to take it apart. Something needs to be considered. But generally speaking, we do work on any make and model of firearm. Something we sort of did as an initiative to grow the workshop and what we do. So look, we do works on all sorts of things. But yeah, if it's something that is very, very unique and you want to change the barrel element and it has some crazy retention method of how the barrel screws onto the action, obviously we need to consider that. We might not have the tool on the shelf for it. Doesn't mean we can't do it, or not willing to have a look at it. So we repair all sorts of things. We modify a lot of things. Cerakoted Ruger and an Adler today. Who knows what tomorrow brings. Yeah.
Wow.
I've got a tie pan in the workshop to do for someone. I'd have to go through the monstrous pile of work that sits before me to go through. But yeah, we do. Yeah, a lot of stuff we do. Dealers order it for a customer off the shelf, so before we've even sent it to them, we might do some Cerakoting on it, or laser engraving, something like that, or muzzle threading. And then obviously the dealers that get those questions from a lot of guys that come in and go, oh yeah, I've got this gun, I want to get it Cerakoted. Yep, no problem. Send it over to us. We can sort it out.
It's a great service.
Yeah, we saw the opportunity that it's not something such a large sort of business in Australia offering that sort of service. We thought let's give it a go. Let's see how it goes. It keeps getting bigger and more people getting in on the service. Like I said, that's what we're sort of aiming to do, is give the best service, the best customer experience, and that sort of thing. And like I said, we can't do everything, but we're working on it. But we do have a lot of services on offer, and we're obviously trying to maintain a quick turnaround time as well for a lot of stuff, obviously depending on the job. So always give us an email or get in touch with us on the phone, and just run through what you want to do and what you want to achieve.
And I mean, personally, I've already started that process with Byron. So I got in touch with Byron with regards to my sail, which has got a little bit of surface metal damage to it from some rust. And we started the process about getting it Cerakoted. He inquired about what was the make, what was the caliber, what did you want done, and then what color did you want, basically. And I think you basically said the possibilities are almost endless about what you want, whether you want to go traditional, whether you want to go Minecraft, the options are there. And we started that process and had that conversation, decided on what colors I wanted, and now we're just going to get the rifle down to them. That's all. And then they'll work their magic. So looking forward to seeing the finished product, and we'll definitely put it up.
I think we're looking forward to in the off season collecting up all of the magazines that we've got and sending them down for Blaze Orange treatment. Love what they've done with the BRX with the Blaze magazine. So you might get a post bag sometime shortly with a dozen magazines to do for us.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, really good.
The Cerakote one is probably the one where you can spend a lot of time talking when some people might not have been to their website and seen how many colours there are, and then
it's crazy.
And then add worse the fact that you can custom mix colours and make something never done before as well. A lot of people go, it's too many choices. So
there is too many choices for me. That was it.
Can be. So sometimes it's good just to go, okay, what colours do I like as primary colours? And then maybe do I want a traditional or do I want to go real out there and different is a good way to maybe look at them.
For me, I looked at the rifle. What is the rifle? What is the caliber? How does it look? It's got, the timber stock. It's a 9.3. It's quite traditional. I've just thought a traditional color. Where I think, Mark, that BRX of yours with the Minecraft, that needed that pattern. It really does fit the rifle. Whereas I think mine's a lot more traditional, and I want to keep it that way.
Absolutely.
But I'm definitely going Blaze Orange mag. That's for sure.
The Minecraft one was interesting because, Scott said, I actually came up with something that initially was pretty mild, I just wanted like solid greens and stuff. And he said, nah, why bother doing that? Go, well, okay, sure. Let's think about it, And so we hit on the idea of digicam being the pattern, and then we played around with colors, and I literally just watched TV shows and where I saw that different types of digicam, because there is, myriad of colors in it, and there was one that I liked that was kind of had a touch of, it was slightly, it almost had like a blue in it, and we just played around ideas with that, and also that particular rifle, the desire for that rifle was to have an aim point. So, how would the rifle look with very small optic on it type thing? A scope, even a small scope, is a much more dominant optic than the aim point. So it was about playing around with that and saying, okay, what would also work with an aim point? So it was a fun process, and it's a lovely gun to shoot. There's no doubt about it. So that'll be going to the Pilliga at the end of the year.
We're planning a
sure.
One. Yep.
Yeah, that's where that'll be going, and maybe Severn beforehand.
If you can get in.
If we can get in.
Some buggers let the secret out. Never mind.
Okay. Well, look, guys, I think that's probably a good place to bring it to the close. Any more from you, Ian or John?
No, I think that's been great. Lots of great questions answered, and I might go run an oily rag through my rifle.
Well, you could talk if you talk to it. That's close enough. So,
I'll be able to, if it comes out twisted, it's because the barrel might be bent.
Might be. Yeah. You shouldn't leave rifles in the dark, should you?
No,
need a little.
Anyway, it's
okay. Yeah. Well, what's the name? What's the name? Keychain fob for your phone. You can find it.
Blaze Orange mags. That's what you need.
Yeah, Blaze Orange. I actually want to really run the Blaze Orange mags more than anything because it's just it's a good standout feature.
Definitely.
And the Blaze Orange for most people is an important part of their hunting.
Maybe I got another
public
idea.
Land.
Maybe we'll send Cerakote an email and ask him to do some glow in the dark paint. How about that?
No. I'll stick with the colour of the animals. Thanks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just as long as it glows and it's only glow in the dark within the human optic spectrum. So, yeah.
Yeah, no. Look, send it.
Cool, well, thanks, Byron. It was really
Good.
good chat, mate. Really
No problem.
appreciate it.
Happy to join. Happy to be here.
Yep. Okay, mate. Thanks for your time and for your information. And if you want to get anything done, give Byron a call. He does some
mate.
cracking work.
All
Cool.
right, cheers.
Good stuff.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.